You're listening to the Music Book Podcast with your host, Marc Masters.
Hey, thanks for checking out the Music Book Podcast. I'm Marc Masters. I've written 2 books about music, No Wave, published in 2008, and High Bias, The Distorted History of the Cassette Tape, published in 2023. This time around, I was super psyched to talk with Adele Bertei. She's the author of No New York, a memoir of No Wave and the women who shaped the scene, released today, March 31st, 2026 by Beacon Press. It's an insightful and super entertaining chronicle of Adele's journey through New York music and art in the late 70s, including her time in Contortions and The Bloods, as well as her solo career. And it also delves deep into so many figures of the scene that she worked with and associated with, particularly women such as Lydia Lunch, Nan Golden, Vivienne Dick, Patti Smith, and tons more. There have been a few books on No Wave before, including one by Thurston Moore and Byron Coley and one by me, but this is the first that gives an insider's view from a female perspective. As she writes, I wrote this book to dig deeper. What truly set No Wave apart from other artistic movements of the 1970s and early 80s? The women. They didn't just participate, they set the tone and they lit the fuse, resisting tired stereotypes and reinventing according to our individual artistic visions. Dismantling art's male-dominated paradigm, we ignored the boundaries of gender and genre. Adele's written a lot of other books, especially recently. She has a 33 1/3 entry on Sinead O'Connor's Universal Mother. She wrote a book for Texas Press on why Patti LaBelle matters. And she has a memoir of her days with Peter Loeffner called Peter and the Wolves, which is like a really nice companion to this book, No New York, because it details Adele's days in Cleveland before she moved to New York. As always, any questions or comments, email me at musicbookpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our Instagram account, which is @themusicbookpodcast, and search for us on YouTube. We have our episodes up there now too, audio only with a nice little picture of the book. So here is my conversation with Adele Bertei. I hope you dig it. When did the genesis of the idea for this book come to you, and how did you kind of put together the idea that you wanted to write this book specifically?
Well, I think that, it was such a profound moment in time and place, especially for women and for me, because I loved both yours and Thurston and Byron's books. I thought I was so happy that you both gave credence and the importance of women in that scene, that you paid attention to it in the book. And I thought, because I was in that scene as a woman and experienced feminism on a newly profound level through the act of being able to create beyond genre and gender, that it was really important to kind of do a diaristic vision of the scene from my POV. And I started working on it many, many years ago, probably, 20, maybe even as early as 2017, 2018. But I was doing it in bits and bobs because I had other books that I was working on at the time. So, I was just really inspired to finish it recently because of it, because of a lot of what's going on today in the world as well.
Sure. Yeah. And you even make the point too. It's like, people are leaving, and it's good to get it down as soon as we can, before more people are gone. And I'm curious, did you go about speaking to anybody specifically for the book in terms of like maybe a little research or a little kind of, did this happen the way I remember it kind of thing? Or was it mostly basically just from your POV and memories?
I did speak to some people. Yes, definitely. I spoke to jog my memory because, there were just moments and dates and, for instance, iterations of the Contortions that I didn't know when and where and things like that. And so Weasel Walter was a great help.
Yeah, he was with my book too.
That he knows absolutely every moment in time and person and place and gig. And so he was really helpful in that regard. I spoke to Sylvia Morales-Reed, who was married to Lou Reed and was very close with Anya. I spoke with Pat Place. And really, those were probably the 3 main people I spoke with. And most of it was based on my own memory. I did speak with Michael Zilka a little bit about Z Records. But otherwise, it was that. Those were the people that probably helped me the most in terms of also jarring my memory of things.
Cool. Cool. One of the things I really liked about the book, and this kind of relates to the idea of memory and remembering it and trying to reconstruct some of the things that happened, is that
Mhm.
there's a present tense kind of feel to it. Even
Mm.
though you do reflect on things and you do have a little bit of distance and perspective, I didn't
Mhm.
feel like it, I felt like in many parts of it, I had a good feel for what it was like to actually be experiencing the things and be there.
Mm.
I'm
Some
curious how much
perspective.
you
I
thought
didn't
about that,
feel
about
like
wanting
it,
to
I
make
felt
it
like I in
sort
many
of
places,
present, even though you were, you have the perspective of many years since to think about all these things.
Mm.
Mhm. Right.
Like I
Mhm.
wrote a memoir about my childhood. It's more of an autofiction, but it was all in the
Mhm.
present tense of the child going through it. And
Mhm.
there's elements of that personal experience and presentness in the other books I write, like the book I wrote about LaBelle, Why LaBelle Matters, what it was like to see the three of them in
Mhm.
1975 and how that
Mhm.
happened, and Sinead O'Connor, and so whenever I'm writing, I do try to kind of bring the visceral and try to be as present in the
Mhm.
memories and what I'm writing about, be it
Mhm.
a personal memory or a non-fictional account of
Mhm.
memories
Mhm.
and what I'm writing about,
Interesting.
be
And
it
that kind of interesting
a
that you started
non-fictional
this so
account
long,
of
not super long
what
ago, but long ago
um,
enough that you've had, I think it's 4 books published in the time that you've put to starting this one and having this one published, right? So I imagine, so I mean, you've always been a writer, but even at as you mentioned in the book, at the time you wrote for some publications then, and so it's always been part of you. But I'm curious if this recent spate of publishing so many things and writing so often, did that make you feel like, I don't know, better at it, or more sort of like in the rhythm of writing that would inform the way that this book ended up? Yeah.
well, I think so. I mean, I think so.
Mhm.
There's so much more I need to learn about writing.
Mhm.
And of course, each book pushes me further towards where I want to be as a writer. But I have been pretty prolific in the last few years, but it has a lot to
Yeah.
do with the fact that I'm getting older. And I feel like
Sure.
the
Uh-huh.
things that I have experienced, if there's any way that I can inspire other people towards what
Mhm.
I've gone through or what I've learned, it's pretty
Mhm.
important that I get it out now because
Right.
I mean, not just that I'm old, but what's going to happen in the next, few
Right.
days.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
that's where we are
Exactly.
right now. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, there is an urgency to a lot of things right now, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
some parallels, Mark, some parallels
sure.
about like what New York was like when we got there. It was in ruins.
Hmm.
And it was the
Hmm.
artists who rebuilt it,
Hmm.
really.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because New York had been a glorious city up until the probably the early 60s. And then it fell
Hmm.
into ruin. And downtown, the
Hmm.
artists, we all moved in and we
Hmm.
rebuilt this incredible energy and scene. And then, of course, the money people came in and took it all over once we had built
Right.
it. But here
Mhm.
we are, where we're rushing towards ruin in America. What's going to happen? I predict if
Right.
we can get through this without being annihilated, it's going to be the artists who rebuild it, the
Yeah,
creative
it seems pretty
visionaries,
likely. Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
So
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. I hope that's the case.
I hope so
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, one of the things that is often talked about with that no wave scene is that everybody was sort of doing everything, participating in all kind of mediums, and like, and you did too. You wrote, you sang, you were in a band, but you made your own music. You were in
Hmm.
films. Some people
Hmm.
directed and played instruments and all things like that. And
Yeah.
that's always a fascinating part of the scene. But what I loved about your depiction of it is it made it seem both new but also kind of natural. Like nobody really even ever thought, "Oh, I can't do this." It was sort of a lot of let's try this and let's try that. And I thought that came across really well in the way you wrote the book. Is that
Mhm.
something that you thought about? As, I mean, obviously you must have, but was it a sort of a challenge to make it seem like both we were creating something new, but we were also doing what just came naturally to everybody kind of at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a contrast to where we are now because we've been
Hmm.
kind of socially engineered into our own specific lanes, so to speak.
Right. Hmm.
Brands, we have to slap a brand on our ass or else we're not valid.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that was something that was extremely, we were very nonconformist,
Hmm.
non-consumer, non,
Hmm.
that was the whole no of it all was we felt free of all of that type of commodification. And it did feel very natural. It just felt like we can do whatever we want. Let's do it. There's just such a plethora of wonderful creative aspects to our humanity. We have a junkyard here. Let's pull the junk and put it together into something extreme. And it wasn't always beautiful, that's for sure.
Right.
But it really had a lot to do with, the extension of our nervous systems, kind of the anxiety of the time in America politically, and like pushing pushing our nervous systems to the extremes of that, feeling that anxiety and being truthful about it in our work.
Mm. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what makes one of the reasons that it's still so thought about and such a figured considered such a vital scene now. Is I think
Mm-hmm.
people are attracted to the idea that it wasn't there as much as statements were being made and boundaries were being pushed. It wasn't artificial. It wasn't sort of like we're just doing look at us kind of. It was
Yes.
almost like maybe people aren't even really going to look at us, but we don't we don't
But we
care
don't care. We
necessarily.
don't care. And it wasn't, someone recently said to me, well, it was kind of dystopian, but then it was utopian. And I'm
Hmm.
thinking, no, we didn't think in binary terms. It was both. It was
Right.
all of it.
Uh-huh.
And that was the great thing about not thinking in the binary. And that had to do with gender too. Like women were doing what we wanted to do. And I think a lot of that had to do with Patti Smith. Patti Smith was
Mm-hmm.
kind of the Pied Piper. Women artists didn't dress like Patti Smith. They didn't recite poetry like her. They didn't do music like her. So she broke every paradigm for women artists. And so many women just came to New York following on her lead, from Europe, from Japan, from all over the country. So I don't think it's ever been framed that way. And that was another impetus for me to write this book, is to
Mm-hmm.
to show that this was probably the first revolutionary art movement in the world of women in one place, where
Right.
so many women
Right.
were involved.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's interesting. The theme we're sort of talking about here also, as you say, goes over to gender and to interpersonal relationships. I mean,
Hmm.
women with men with men
Hmm.
who didn't necessarily consider themselves just a man, or and same with
Right.
women. And I
Yeah.
liked how in the book that you make a
Hmm.
point of like that was also another natural thing that we were doing, and we didn't question it too much, and we
Right.
didn't think we had to
Yeah.
conform, but it's also was just what we wanted to be doing. It wasn't because we thought, oh, we have to rebel. It's like we happened to be rebelling, doing what we wanted to do. Is that kind of the sense you got? Yeah. Have to rebel. It's like we. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
There was just something about the predictions that some of those writers and artists made about women that just came out in our
Hmm.
personalities and our work, that felt very natural. Yeah, it's like I think I say this in the book, but it felt like something was cracking open, and we didn't even know what was cracking open, but it
Right.
was happening, and we were
Uh-huh.
all involved, and it was very fluid. And
Hmm.
because it was very fluid and there was no branding or ideologies, and I say ideology because of idiocy,
Right.
that's the way I like to pronounce it. But there was this incredible fluidity where you didn't feel like you had to fit into a box, and change was essential
Right.
to life.
Hmm.
So if when one brands themselves and conforms, you're giving capitalism the perfect in to completely
Right.
control what you buy, how to sell to you, et cetera, et cetera. And
Hmm.
the fluidity of sexuality was great too, because it was more, well, for some of us, I'm not saying for all of us. So I make that clear in the beginning of the book. This is
Mm-hmm.
what I saw and what some of my friends felt, is that whoever you felt attracted to or drawn to is who you were going to be with. And
Mm-hmm.
there were no, yes, like for instance, the Bloods was a queer all women band, but at the same time there was a freedom, a sexual freedom where I was also with
Mm-hmm.
James Nares, who was a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful man and a woman. So these things were far more fluid and left the ability for change so that you
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be judged by one community or ideology or another. You could do whatever you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do.
Right.
Be free without judgment.
Right. Yeah. And I love how that fluidity comes across in the book, not only just by you stating it and showing it, but the writing and the structure has a fluidity to it that's not, even though you're chronological, it's not 100% linear. There's times
Right.
when you go
Yeah.
back to some other subjects and go forward, and it kind of gives the sense of, maybe a little bit of what mentally you felt like then, that things were
Mhm.
happening kind of all over the place and changing quickly. And maybe you'd go back to being with someone, or you'd jump forward to being with someone else. I'm
Mhm.
curious, was that a conscious way of that you thought of writing the book, to have that kind of like flowing, like everything is happening in a stream kind of thing, or is that sort of a natural way you like the way you prefer to write in general, or?
Oh, well, for that particular book, I think it wasn't a conscious decision to write it that way, but it did seem to come out that way as the way it was happening. Like you said, it was just
Mm-hmm.
everything was happening at once. And I
Right.
wasn't trying to, I guess I didn't want to confuse the reader, but at the same time, I wanted to be able to show the reader the kind of myriad of experiences that could happen all in
Mm-hmm.
a week, or
Right. Mm-hmm.
all
Yeah.
in one apartment in the Chelsea hotel.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's great. You mentioned you allude a little bit to the part of the intro where you talk about not everybody had the same experience and stuff. And there's a really interesting part that I'll quote from here, if you don't mind, where you say, "I'm not here to typecast or smooth over contradictions and nuances of people or to expose anyone. What I can offer is how it lived in me, stitched together through memory and feeling." I think that's an interesting, because that's a challenge of any kind of memoir, when you're talking about people you knew and you still know, or maybe had different kinds of relationships with, is you want to.
Mhm.
I thought you were very sympathetic and generous toward everybody in the book, without trying to hide flaws, or if James Chance made a mistake in running the band, you talk about it,
Mhm.
but you don't
Yeah.
make it seem like we hated James Chance because he did this one thing,
Right.
or you're
Yeah.
not there to paint him as a villain. He's a complicated person just like everybody else in the book. Just
Right.
curious, that's to me seems like a interesting challenge, to make sure you're being as open to what the people did as you were, without like trying to pretend that they were all without flaws. You know what I
Well, yeah,
mean?
I was trying to expose the contradictions in how they affected me personally,
Mm-hmm.
as well as expose my own flaws, my own flawed
Sure.
thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Because, there were lot of decisions made that were quite self-destructive at the same time. And a lot of it had to do with, the dark side, which is something that drugs and alcohol
Mm-hmm.
draws you one into. So I was careful because
Mm-hmm.
and alcohol draws you one into. So I was careful because an honor to people who were taking extreme risks in that scene,
Mm-hmm.
to live
Mm-hmm.
in a way that only the French symbolist poets could talk about, or
Right.
Artaud could talk about, or a surrealist could paint. We were living that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that can come sometimes with tragedy. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be able to paint that picture also kind of as a cautionary tale for young
Mm-hmm.
artists as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like that George Harrison song, Beware of Darkness. Because nobody really talks about, how dark that can be in terms of
Mm-hmm.
art making. We would romanticize, like, oh, Billie Holiday was a junkie, so yeah, that'll work for me, won't it? No.
Right.
Look
Right.
what it did to
Right.
Billie.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so there was a romanticism that also came from reading all of that literature that we kind of involved ourselves in, but it could be very dark and very destructive. So I wanted
For
to
sure.
talk about. those things
Mm-hmm.
in a truthful way.
Yeah, I think you really did. I think you really did.
Oh, thank you.
And there's so many different people, some of whom make bigger characters like Pat Place and some of the people, Lydia, and some of the people you mentioned earlier. But then a lot of different people are mentioned, and you talk about your encounters with some people or how you were influenced or how you might have even inspired them. And I mean, like I didn't really realize how much William S. Burroughs was involved in some of your life during this part of it. That was really cool. And I'm just curious, like, did you find that as you went along, it was sort of natural to be like, oh yeah, I should also talk about what I did with this person one day, or the year I spent a lot of time with that person, or did you sometimes have to consciously say to yourself, well, I better make sure that I get them in the book, or it was I'm just curious how that process went of talking, including all the people you wanted to include.
I think I tried to concentrate on the moments that were the most profound for me, or the people that were
Mm,
affected me the most. For instance, when I write about William Burroughs, it was in the context of the Nova Convention, which people don't really know about. And that was an
yeah.
incredible week of events that happened in New York
Hmm.
City. And my opportunity to meet Brian Geisen, who was one of my big
Yeah.
heroes, even more so than Burroughs. I mean,
Hmm.
I think Burroughs was, he was a visionary,
Hmm.
but he was also a criminal.
Hmm.
And, he murdered his wife. We can't forget that. So
Right, right.
again, here's these contradictions that
Hmm.
appear in the romanticism of our art heroes. And
Hmm.
but yeah, I really wanted to concentrate on people who had a profound effect on me. Like for instance, Janet
Hmm.
Hamill, a poet who
Hmm.
people aren't very aware of. She's always kind of been in the shadow of Patti Smith, but she is absolutely brilliant. She's like a mystical poet that really should
Hmm.
be well read, I think. So I
Hmm.
wanted to bring attention to certain people that have also been kind of obscured, that were part of that scene as well.
That's great.
Mm.
And with your focus being sort of like women specifically, in terms of, I mean, what I liked also is it's a book about, the subtitle is about the women of the scene, and that's the
Mhm.
concentration. But you don't just hold yourself. I mean, you also are exploring all sorts of different experiences you had.
Oh yeah.
And that kind of naturally helps show how women were so important, because it doesn't feel like you're just specifically saying only women. You're saying there were a lot of
Right.
women in this story.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I speak about men who inspired me too, like James Chance
Hmm.
and Jim
Hmm.
Jarmusch, and people in the scene that I knew,
Hmm.
who I really thought, were movers and shakers and did things that were incredibly inspiring. I also think that because of the wild creativity of women in that scene, that the women also pushed the men to take greater
For
risks.
sure.
I,
Yeah.
I really believe that. So it was kind of this mutual thing that was happening between us all, between men and women, that really had to do with us all pushing each other. I mean, if men felt entitled, which many did,
I'm sure.
their entitlement got threatened by all these women
Uh-huh.
saying, "Hey, look at what we're
Yeah.
doing."
Yeah.
So, and instead of oppressing us, they kind of they rolled with it, and it was exciting. I mean, what's I talk about a very dark moment too that happened with a male colleague during that time. But so it wasn't all equality and love and
Sure.
roses, that's for
Yeah.
sure. But there was a lot of danger and some darkness during that time. But yeah, I think the women really inspired the men
Yeah.
in many
Yeah.
ways.
No, I think that's a good point that you make, because I think unfortunately the default is often when we see a scene where women did have more of a role, to immediately compliment the men. Oh, that's so cool that you let the women have more
Yeah,
of a role.
that you allowed
Whereas like,
them.
yeah. Whereas no, I think it probably happened because the women didn't hold back. That's probably
Exactly.
why,
We were not looking for
so
permission, that's for sure.
yeah. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
I like how there's a sort of there's many turns of the arc and narrative arc in the book, but one of the turns I thought was most interesting was when you kind of realize to yourself, as much as I've enjoyed being with the Contortions and playing with Lydia and playing other different configurations, I really like pop music too, and really
Mhm.
like to make some melodic music. Was that kind of fun and interesting to think back on, that you made that kind of creative turn? Because I think it was a really cool turn, and
Yeah.
one that showed like that you were open to everything. You didn't have to just define yourself by the no wave that was happening at the time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I always loved pop music from when I was a little kid. I mean, and you could talk about things like the Shadows of Night as being a pop
Sure.
artist. I mean, as garage band in many ways, some of those songs were very poppy and they were on the radio in the
Oh, for sure.
60s, and I was a kid in the a very young kid in the 60s and loving what I heard on the radio. I loved Motown. I loved rock and roll. I loved, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. This was very pre Velvet Underground, but I, and then what was happening in the 80s in England was so inspiring to me. Pop music in the 80s in England was incredible. There were so many great artists happening, from Tears for Fears to Erasure to, oh God, I'm trying to think. There's just so many. I can't think off the top of my head, but
there's so many of them. Yeah.
It was
Eurythmics, maybe.
Scritti Politti, Eurythmics, yeah.
Great.
So so it was really inspiring, and I loved to sing. I learned how to sing in gospel choirs when I was a kid. And I wasn't able to really use my voice in No Wave because melodic singing was not cool.
Right.
It's like as you listen to those records, everybody was kind of screaming like they were having a schizophrenic breakdown.
Right. Right. Which is great.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I loved it. My mother was schizophrenic, so I'm like, oh, this feels at home.
That's funny.
But I do love pop music, and I always have. And when it's good.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because it brought up a sort of point of intersection that I hadn't really thought of before, because everything always gets pushed into genres and scenes. But there was a point that you point out that you and Madonna were kind of having the same career trajectory and kind of competitors for a window of time, which is really an interesting little turn in the book.
Yes, people don't know about that. I mean, when we first started, her first record, she was signed to Sire Records and I was signed to Geffen Records. Same moment in time. And her first single, Everybody, languished on the dance charts. And my single, Build Me a Bridge, shot up the pop charts. I mean, the dance charts. So she got very catty with me because originally we were kind of friendly. We'd hang out at the Pyramid and we'd like tease each other, and and we lived on the same block for a moment. But as soon as my record started to succeed, it was like,
right.
But also there was, there's a fracas that I write about with Marc who had produced Madonna, who remixed my single Build Me a Bridge for the dance floor without Thomas Dolby knowing about it, which really started the end of my relationship with Geffen Records. So I didn't even want to get into the whole trajectory of, the corporate music business and what I went through in this book. I don't know if I ever will, because it really is a debacle that is very hard on the heart. So, but I mean, Madonna, what a character, and very responsible for a lot of, not her per se, but I think what happened with the corporate music business is in the 1990s, and I'm going to tell a little story here. Bill Clinton did something called the Telecommunications Act. I think it was 1995. Don't quote me on the date. But when he signed that act, it basically consolidated radio all over the country.
Right.
And all of a sudden, really profound women's voices were off the radio. And I'm talking about Sinead O'Connor, Tori Amos, Alanis Morissette, Queen Latifah, women that had very strong, defiant voices disappeared from the radio in the second half of the 90s. And I think what happened was the corporate powers that be saw Madonna as this example of the kind of woman that was perfect to promote, because she had this trick. Whereas if I act like like kind of a slutty, sexy, diva, and she's a great performer, I give her so many kudos for that. But her message was very tricky, because instead of being defined in the political way that a lot of other women were being in the 90s, she was like, oh, I'm going to seize my sluttiness as power for women. And it diabolically turned into this anti-feminist thing where the corporate powers that be were able to just smash women's voices and uphold, like people singing about the P word, women singing about, you know what I
Right.
mean? It
Right.
turned into something else altogether. And I feel like right now, God, it would be so inspiring to see girl bands just shouting out against the
Yeah.
patriarchy again, like,
Mm,
like
mm.
punk, like full blown punk. I might even have to get back into doing a punk band.
Oh, that'd be great. That would be awesome. I hope you do.
Before they have to wheel me onto the stage in a wheelchair, I should do it.
Right. Oh, I think you should too. That would be awesome.
Oh, thank you,
That
Mark. Thank
that actually makes me think about one of the quotes I love. I mean, there's so many quotable things in the book, but there's a line, and let me see if I can. Oh,
Sure.
it's just one line, but it's great. With the contortions, I made music out of pain and art out of internalized violence,
Mm.
which I think is just such a powerful way to put it. And I think it's even now, after this many years after No Wave, I still think it's a thing that people, it doesn't occur to people that that's something you can make art out of that can
Yes,
be,
well,
therapeutic
exactly.
and also meaningful.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think,
Mhm.
we have all of us right now, we're kind of anesthetized by what's going on because we're being just fire hosed with so much just
Mhm.
horrible cruelty. But I mean, internalized rage can really make people sick, you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
for
it's
sure.
bad for the health. And I think that art
Hmm.
is like conducive to that expression. It has to be a careful alchemical process of how that is presented. But
Hmm.
I think I've always thought about this in terms of Gabriel Garcia Lorca. He
Mm.
wrote about the duende, and I talk about this, I think, in the book. I always talk about it because it's such a beautiful, profound concept to me about art, which is that you can always tell if someone has the duende in their work. And the duende, it's very different from the muse, which you're waiting for the inspiration of the muse to come down.
Right.
And the duende is something that we all have emotional wounds. And if we can open those wounds and let the duende, this little spirit, this little mischievous spirit, in through the wounds to kind of activate and play and figure things out and dance and
Mhm.
stir up the blood, and that you have to be brave to be able to do that.
For
That
sure.
if you're brave enough to let that process happen, and it's an alchemical process as well, the duende will come back out into your art.
Mm.
Like, for instance, Maria Callas had duende.
Mm.
Goya had duende. Madonna does not have duende in the voice. You know what I mean? You can tell if a painting has duende, or a piece of music, or a piece of writing. And I always judge, like, pieces of art by whether the artist has duende. Amy Winehouse, duende for
Mm.
days. You
For
know what
sure.
I
That's a
mean?
great
So
example.
so so
Yeah.
it's like, that is a concept that I try to incorporate in my work, and I know it comes out in tiny little moments here and there,
Hmm.
but I want to embrace it even more, and that takes a lot of strength to be able to expose your vulnerabilities, you know,
Absolutely.
because people are very afraid of that. They're afraid of that exposure, and I feel that's the exposure that makes great art.
Absolutely.
If you have to write a thesis, a mini thesis, and tack it up next to a painting, that's academia. That's not art to me.
Right.
That
Right.
if it has to be explained in some lexicon that people don't understand, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. We're talking about this in the context of music, but it just as much, I would imagine it just as much applies to writing a memoir like this. Is you have to be willing to expose the things about yourself. And I'm curious,
Yeah.
if was that an interesting process to be like, it might be a little painful to say some of these things, but I think it's important that they
Yeah.
be part of the book.
Oh, no, no, it is painful.
Mhm.
And, I don't know if this comes with age, but at some point your ego.
Right. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Uh-huh. 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 Hmm. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
We're not going to let you keep raping girls and
Right.
children,
Right.
but we
Hmm.
are going to create something extremely different. And part of that process is not allowing this anymore. We're not going to allow this
Right.
darkness to take us. And we're going to build something new from the ruins that you are pushing on, pushing into us. We're going to
Right.
just exercise those demons, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, I do think that one of the key things everybody has to try to be thinking is whenever you're feeling down about what's happening and feeling
Mhm.
powerless, just remember that's what they want you to feel. And so
Well,
that's
exactly.
good enough
That's a
reason
good
not to
enough
feel
reason
that
not to
way.
feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bravo. You nailed it.
Thanks. I'm curious talking about, expressing yourself in the book and how you confronted different things. How was the process of revising it? Did you have a draft longer than they wanted at some point? Were there stories that you decided, well, I like the story, but maybe it doesn't work, so I need to cut it out? Were there many things like that?
Yes, there were. I'll tell you the truth. I did write a
Mm,
lot about my experiences in the corporate music business.
mm,
And I was
mm.
warned that I could legally be in hot water because
Okay.
you cannot accuse men in positions of power with a lot of money who can sue you
Mm,
about like things like sexual harassment because you can't prove that stuff.
right.
And as women, that voice is always taken away from us. And I can talk about it fictionally, and I will in the future, but
Mm,
I was not able to talk about it in the book.
mm,
So those
mm.
are stories that are going to have to take another voice somewhere else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's wild. I mean, even as much as we like to pretend we've made progress, it's like I don't know how familiar you are with that Johnny Depp case, but she wrote something that didn't even reference him, and he was able to sue her
oh, of
for
course.
just it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to
it's
be real. I
crazy.
mean, that's why the Epstein girls are, they're not able to name names yet. Some of them
Right.
are, but
Hmm.
collectively they can't name the names yet because there's these men in power that will ruin their lives and have already ruined several of their lives. This is like the end of the patriarchy. I see it like a toxic boil just exploding on us all.
Right.
And it's gonna get darker before it gets better, but it's up to
Right.
us to kind of be the disinfectant.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, they say a horse kicks hardest when it's dying, so hopefully
That's
that's
right.
what's happening here. Yeah.
Yeah.
One interesting subject that you touch on some in the book that I wish I had been able to delve more into to my book, but I never really got the chance to talk to people more specifically about it is the whole Cleveland to New York connection. Because there
Mm.
were so many people going, it even started with, I mean, I think some of the more legendary Velvet shows happened in Cleveland.
Oh yeah.
And then you went from Cleveland to there. Tim Wright did, quite a few people,
Oh
and
yeah.
it seemed and back and forth too, not just moving one
Mhm.
direction. I'm curious if
Mhm.
was there ever a feeling at the time that there was any kind of specific reason other than the fact that both places seemed excited, welcoming to creative people?
Well, I think in Cleveland, we were all very, very inspired by what was happening in New York City with television, with Patti, with the Ramones, with
Mm,
there was so much going on. And in
mm,
Cleveland, to stay there would have meant, staying in a certain amount of obscurity. But there were
mm,
so many artists that were drawn to New York and knew that it was cheap to live there. I mean,
mm,
Jim Jarmusch, the
mm.
Dead Boys,
Right.
Tim Wright,
Mm,
Chrissy Hine from Akron. Well, she got out and went to London. But there
right.
was the Waitresses. There were so
Mm,
many bands. Devo. Well, actually, no, I
mm.
don't think they moved to New York, did they?
They mostly were stayed in the area, but they certainly I mean, like one of their first big things was playing on Saturday Night Live. So they definitely
Yes,
had some
yes,
New York stuff happening for them for
right,
sure.
right,
I think
yeah.
that's how Eno found out about them through being in New York too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Cynthia
Hmm.
Slay, the singer of the Bush Tetras, and
Hmm.
Laura Kennedy, who passed away, were both from Cleveland as well. So there was a huge exodus at one point, because to stay there would have meant, just kind of wallowing in obscurity with each other.
Uh-huh.
Whereas New York had all these other possibilities, and it was so
Hmm.
much more exciting.
Yeah, speaking of just, I happen to randomly bring up Eno. That's a really interesting section of the book too, because I had heard, I think Weasel actually told me that you worked with him at some
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
but I hadn't heard the specifics before, and I thought that was really fascinating. That seemed like quite an experience. That even though it
Oh,
was
it was,
relatively brief.
yeah, yeah. No, he was amazing. I learned
Hmm.
so much from him just by the way he would approach tone and timbre in
Hmm.
sound in general, not just in
Hmm.
music. He
Hmm.
was so sensitive that way, and I really admired him, and
Hmm.
I was always regretful that I couldn't work with him longer because
Hmm.
I had to go on my first tour, which was very exciting.
Right.
But it's funny because a lot of interviewers want to focus on the list he gave me, the
Right.
shopping list, and it's like, okay,
Uh-huh.
come on, let's go for the prurient.
Uh-huh.
It's like, come on.
Yeah.
They're so
Yeah.
much more important than,
Uh-huh.
what his predilections were for women or
Hmm.
whatever. So, and that kind of stuff didn't bother us back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless it was egregious, unless someone was sexually
Yeah.
harassing you.
Yeah. Yeah, I just feel like, I'm not even sure I did it enough in my book, but I feel like you don't quite get the amount of credit in the lore for, like, No New York probably wouldn't exist if you hadn't been. I mean, you told him about a decent amount of the bands, right? I
Well, I
mean,
don't
he
want
he
to,
found out
yeah.
about them for you.
Yeah, well, I don't want to take credit for that,
Uh-huh.
but he was very interested in what was going on downtown, and I did tell him about
Hmm.
the artist space gigs, which
Hmm.
brought
Hmm.
him to those shows, and then in turn, provoked him to want to record the bands. So I don't want to take too much credit there because he was around. He knew what
Sure.
was going on. And when Steve Mass at the Mud Club introduced me to him to work for him,
Hmm.
he was just starting to kind of experience that scene. I think he was coming off of a
Hmm.
Talking Heads production.
Right. Right.
So I don't want to take too much credit for that.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, but you definitely had a hand in it, which I think is really cool and
yeah,
really
yeah.
important. So, and
Thanks.
it's just sort of more testament to the fact that you were doing so much and open to so much and interested in so much that you ended up in a position where you could be a part of that as well as a part of the band on the record as well as a part of other groups. I mean, and that comes across. So that's one of the reasons I think the book is not only really informative and edifying, but it's just fun to read
Oh,
because it just
thanks.
seems like
Yeah.
such an exciting time to be there and be doing all the things you were doing.
Yeah, thanks, thanks. And
Yeah.
to Brian's credit, he was very excited about the fact that so many women were picking up instruments
Mm.
downtown and
Hmm.
and making
Hmm.
this noise that was
Hmm.
unquantifiable. So
Hmm.
to his credit, that I thought that was really important about him at
Hmm.
that moment. Yeah.
Cool. So for a project that's been sort of with you for a while, you said almost like 10 years or so, how's it feel to have it now be something that people are going to be reading and it's out in the world?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that there's probably people in the scene that are going to hate me for it. I
Well,
almost
it's inevitable, I guess, isn't
that's inevitable, but
it?
I
Yeah.
almost called I don't know if you remember this Julia Phillips book. It was called You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again, and it was about
Yes, I
Hollywood.
did.
I thought,
Hmm.
you'll never punk in this town again. That should have been the
Right.
title of the book. But I know it'll have its naysayers, but like I said, I'm not talking for everyone. I'm talking for myself
Right.
and what it felt
Hmm.
like for me. And I hope it inspires people. I hope that it is a view that hasn't been seen that people hopefully will appreciate.
Yeah, oh, I think very much so. Yeah. And one thing I realized, I'm looking at my notes here, that I didn't bring up that I just wanted to also say I loved about the book was the parts about Lizzie Mercier.
Oh, Lizzie Messier,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is she's such an interesting figure, and you really got to some of the things that, and I learned more about her than I had, even though there's not that much out there about her in a lot of ways. And really,
Mm.
someone needs to write a book. I'm not sure if someone has, but I'm not familiar with any full-on biography of her, but that
Yeah,
needs to happen.
there is a biography of her, but it's only in French, and
Okay. Yeah.
I can't remember the author, but I
Hmm.
think I heard that it's not as accurate as it could be, or as
Mm-hmm.
honoring.
Uh-huh.
I don't know because I don't speak
Hmm.
French. But
Right.
I mean, I would love to write something about her, but I've got so many back to back projects lined up
I
right
bet you
now.
do. Oh, that's
But
great.
but I
That's
really
awesome.
wanted to honor her in the book
Hmm.
because
Yeah, I
usually
think you did a
there's,
great job of that. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. She's an incredible figure for
Oh
sure.
yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Cool. 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 Well, thanks so much for talking to me about it, and thanks for writing the book. I really just enjoyed it so
Oh,
much,
thanks,
and
Mark.
thanks for putting my name in there too. That was really a surprise that I really
Oh
felt flattered by
yeah, no, no,
that you
no. It
mentioned
was
me in it. Thank you.
yeah, no, your book was it was very inspiring.
Oh,
Thank
thank you.
you.
That's
Yeah.
great to hear. That's great to hear. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.
The Music Book Podcast is produced, edited, and hosted by Marc Masters. Our theme music is by the great band Savak. Our logo was designed by Walter Carlton. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a rating and a review wherever you hear it. And thanks so much for listening.